All right. Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be welcoming Jane Park as our inaugural speaker for our PK speaker series.
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. We usually would sit closer together, but we were just really excited to find a way to do this in person and have a bit more engaging, hopefully, for all of you too. So what's exciting is we're actually broadcasting from our brand new PK Ballard office in Seattle, Washington. So we're very excited about that as well. And what a way to celebrate International Women's Month. I mean, how cool is that? Especially because our PK Women's Mentor Program actually has women from all of our international locations. So we have women joining us from the US and from Argentina and from Mexico and from India. And we are recording it because we don't expect all of our India participants to be up at this time. We will share it out later as well. So as part of our overall diversity, equity, and inclusion program, we started our Women Mentor Program last year. We now have over 100 mentees and about 40 mentors, and it is growing rapidly every day, which is really cool. And events like this, I'm sure, will make it even more popular. So I just wanted to welcome all of our mentors and mentees to this event, as well as a number of other PKers and special guests as well. That just wanted to tune in to hear Jane's story. So welcome, everybody. We also want this to be really interactive. So there's a Q&A Q&A function on Zoom. And so please send your questions in, and we're taking those questions and hope to address them as we go through the program. And to put an extra incentive on your participation, we actually are planning to do a drawing of everybody who puts in questions in order to send a special Tokki gift, which you're going to be learning more about Tokki in a minute too. So that is very exciting, trust me. So please send in those questions. So now I want to fully introduce our special guest, Jane Park. So Jane Park is the CEO and founder of Tokki, a social and sustainable gifting technology company, merging reusable physical gift wrap with a digital social experience. Tokki is reinventing gift giving to make the experience unforgettable. Prior to founding Tokki, Jane was the CEO and founder of Julep, a disruptor in the beauty space that innovated rapidly by co-creating products with its customers through social media and personalizing offerings to each subscriber. While Julep started online, it's now distributed nationally in stores as well. Jane led Julep to a successful private equity exit in 2016. Jane was also an executive at Starbucks in the New Ventures division, where she launched new consumer businesses. She was also a leader at the Boston Consulting Group and a founding director of the CEO Forum for Education and Technology, with luminaries such as Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple, and Eckhard Pfeiffer, the CEO of Compaq. She holds a JD from Yale Law School and a BA in Public and International Affairs from Princeton University. A nationally recognized expert in consumer brand building and social commerce, Jane regularly appears on television as well as consumer, technology, and women's leadership conferences. Jane has been recognized in numerous ways professionally, such as Beauty Inc.'s Top 50 Women in Beauty, Elle Magazine, Top Women in Technology, GeekWire CEO of the Year, and she is a Puget Sound Business Journal 40 Under 40. We're so lucky to have you here, Jane, honestly.
Wow, well, we're going to kind of tell the real truth behind some of those accolades. So
we'll try to get to some of the interesting stuff here.
The more interesting stuff is not what's on that resume.
Well, we wanted to kick off actually just by hearing more about Tokki, your current venture. So tell us more about Tokki.
So the inspiration from Tokki came from when we were cleaning up after the holidays one year, and it was just bags and bags and bags of wrapping paper. And I was Googling whether you could recycle wrapping paper, and a lot of it you can't if it is adorned or if it is too thin or too color saturated. Mm-hmm. And I realized that a lot of it was going in the trash. And so I remembered that my grandmother used to wrap important gifts in a square of silk. And so that was the idea. I thought, what if we could convince people to do this easy thing, wrapping paper, in a more sustainable, reusable way? And then it occurred to me that we needed some extra oomph because people are, as a parent, I know that people are more likely to do things when it's a little bit fun. So that's why we added the technology component of a QR code and where you can scan to upload photos and videos so that in this coronavirus time, you can still show up when you can't show up with your gift. And it's so interesting over the last year, when we first started out, nobody knew what a QR code was. So we had to write these descriptions around scan or tap, or you take out your camera phone and you kind of hold it at it, and you don't have to download an app, but there were all these words. We had a whole section of our website dedicated to how to scan a QR code. And now it's so much a part of every day because restaurants are using it, and I think there's an adoption curve, but also coronavirus has helped, necessitated us using QR codes at restaurants and other places where you don't want to touch things. So it's interesting that we did this a year ago, and that technology adoption has sort of worked with the way that our technology works.
That's it. Well, I can actually attest that I even figured it out. It was very easy to do.
You got one of the early prototypes at your birthday.
Yes, I did. I love it. Well, I want to hear more about just your inspiration and how you develop your products. I mean, I know you've got the current Women Who Light Us Up candles for International Women's Month. And how do you come up with all of these interesting ideas?
It was, right before we got on the phone yesterday, I was having a call with my very small but mighty team. And it's interesting when you're running a company, how you can start thinking about, well, what's profitable and what's working right now and who are we and what do we want to be? And I really am passionate about the technology. You can have all these conversations, but it always comes back somewhere in the middle of the conversation. We said, wait, what does the customer want? And what is our ideal relationship with her? And so I think that is kind of, sometimes we, have to have a conversation to get back to that point. But I think the most powerful innovation is really guided by that. Who is your core customer and how do you delight her more? And so for us, our core customer is the serious gift who really wants to make her giftee feel seen and feel like it's special. And that's why when we do our candles, it's about, I write a lot of them myself, and it's about trying to make people feel acknowledged. Like one of our best-selling candles is "Here's to Your Crazy AF Resilience." AF stands for some words we're not supposed to say, and if you're not American, maybe you have to Google that too. But the idea is here's to your crazy resilience. The candle on the back has more text around that, but it's trying to share a moment with someone who might be struggling or who might be needing to be held up a little bit. And doing that in a way where you can send a gift where someone can see your face or your niece's faces. I think that's been really rewarding to us. And how we think about innovation is how do we keep doing that? How do we delight her more? What else does she need to be able to do gifting easily? How do we make it easier for her?
Awesome. That is amazing. It's the creative meets the business thing that you've got going on, which is super impressive. I have to say.
I think it's helpful when you're a woman and you think about multitasking, that it's the creative meets the business. It's sort of thinking about margin and cost of customer acquisition, but also, all of that is easier when your product is stronger. That's not a technology solution, it's a business and innovation solution. But also there's this aspect for us of physical and digital. And that was true for me at Julep too, that it's interesting when you have teams that are working in these different spaces. I'm sure you've had this at PK too, where it's, might not be the physical and digital, but when you're in different worlds, that it's so easy to be frustrated by what somebody else is responsible for when something doesn't go right. So, when you have your goods stuck in China, and then our engineering team has been working, 24/7 to try to launch a new feature, and then we're late because the physical product isn't there. And there's nothing you can do. You can't stay up later to make, like, the Chinese government release your things from customs.
If you could, you would.
Yeah, there's no, and similarly, it's sort of the kind of collaboration and writing code is something that is different from people who do physical product development, where they have to like see and touch it, and it's like, well, we need good lighting because we need to see like what this looks like and how it photographs or whatever. So it's easy to misunderstand each other sometimes and think like, why are they being so lame and blamed? I think in today's day and era, where we're working across so many different functions and ways of doing things, it's really important to have that assumption of positive intent. I think that was one of my favorite tenets of culture at Julep, which we've also brought to Tokki, is assume positive intent, assume that that person is trying their best, and then go in with the conversation of, hey, what's happening?
Awesome. Well, it's I want to talk about pivot points, because you're currently and founded and are running Tokki, but you've done so much in your career. And that's just something I know that a lot of questions come up in our mentor groups about that, pivot points in your career. So you started your career as an impressively educated attorney, and now you are starting and running your own companies. So tell us more about that journey.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but when I was a lawyer, I came home one day, I think it was 6 to 8 months in, and I said to my husband, who was also a lawyer, I would rather cut off my toe than go to work tomorrow. And he was like, ew, no one wants your toe, that's so weird. And you have 2 Ivy League degrees, go find a different job. And that was such, I share that here today because I'm so amazed at how stuck we can feel, especially young women who are perfectionists, especially people who are trying to live up to, for me, it was my immigrant parents' expectations. And so how stuck you can feel when you're not stuck. And to the point of like coming up with these bizarre bargains with yourself. But so that one was sort of recognizing that, hey, I have created my own prison and I don't have to live here. And then a friend of mine, when I started Julep, when I left Starbucks to start Julep, she said, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I think that's a great question too, at pivot points and at different times in your career, if you want to try something new or if you want to go in a different direction, just think in the actual writing out of like, what's the worst case scenario? Because I think we have this cartoon idea in our head of like, the anvil's gonna fall on you, or like, disaster is gonna happen, bombs are gonna explode. And really, I thought, you're right. If this doesn't work out, I will come back and get another job in some big company. It might not be as good of a position, it might not be the same role in the same company, but I can go find a similar role somewhere else. And that's not disaster, that's eminently survivable. So that's I think I love giving more actionable pieces of advice, and for all of you guys who are mentors out there, I think that's a really good thing to think, like not just theoretical, but how can you give somebody a piece of advice that they can live with and actually execute. And so that is one of my favorites, is write out what the worst case scenario is, because for the most part, it's really survivable. So if you're interested in something, if you are thinking of something day in, day out, I often say that pivots are much more like watching kids learn how to walk. It's not at a certain moment that they're walking. It's like you've kind of been taking these steps of lurching from chair to chair, and then all of a sudden you're running. And what's the moment that you started walking? It's hard to know. Similarly, when you're starting a business, there are all these things you do and you're not sure, am I really doing this? It's like you open the bank account, but like until you have your first customer, you're really in business, you get some investors, and some of that starts feeling more and more real as you go along. But it's it's really, feels a lot more gradual. And I think it's helpful to take those gradual baby steps. Don't hold things close to your chest. If you have an idea, talk about it all the time. One of my first investors in Julep was the CEO of BCG for North America. And he was somebody who I admired so much, and he struck such fear in my heart, honestly, because I was young when I started working for him. I literally took his call at Starbucks and I fell out of my chair when I saw his name come up on my phone. Like, that's how, I'm like, I'm a grown woman with a serious career, and I am falling out of my chair because I see this person's name on my phone. But I had shared this idea for Julep, and I wrote this business plan at night, and I sent it to him. And finally he said, Jane, is this like NPR? If I invest, will you stop calling me? And that's when I realized, as a woman, I didn't even have the words to ask for an investment, right? So was that the moment I started the company? I don't know. I think I was sort of gradually pivoting, and I was okay enough to share my ideas with a whole bunch of people. I think lots of times people think, well, someone's going to steal it. And I always say, unless it's a really specific kind of IP, so much of a business is an execution. You're more likely to fail if you don't share and iterate than you are if you do and get people's comments back. And so that's what I thought I was doing. I was just sharing. And then he took me seriously and said, hey, I can write a first check. And that was such a gift. I mean, I think that about mentors too, is for all of you who are doing it, it's amazing. And even for those of you who are mentees, if you have the opportunity to take someone seriously and to tell them that, it's such a gift. It was a huge gift to me that this person, and that wasn't the only time, it was sort of throughout my career. A lot of my mentors have been men, just because that's the era I grew up in. And I don't think I had one perfect mentor. It wasn't like there was someone who was the immigrant, woman who didn't speak English when she went to school, and who grew up and was a lawyer and didn't cut off her toe and started a business.
Right.
Like, there's no one who has that entire same experience that you do. And so finding little bits.
Let's get back to the toe cutting for a minute, because I have an interesting question from actually O'Neill, who's in our mentor program, and asked the question, what influenced you to start your business? And I think it's such a great question, because you really made this leap from corporate America into this unknown. Like, what was, like, can you point to one real influence that got you there?
Gosh.
Besides cutting your toe off.
I think what I'm passionate about is connection and women and connection. And so that's been the thread through all of the things that I like to do and think about, and the businesses that I've launched. So launching a business is so hard. It's really important to find something that you are passionate about, and not just for this moment, like, oh, I really want to try rock climbing.
Right.
Like, what's the thing that you like reading books about, that you like having conversations about, that you could imagine wanting to think about every single day for at least 5 to 10 years? And so I think for me, the passion around girlfriends and how the women who have really seen me and supported me have changed my life. That is the sort of the real kernel behind everything that I do.
And the act of coming up with these clever ideas to start a business, right? Julep and Tokki. Like, how do you come up with these ideas that, this is what I'm going to spend my time focusing on?
Yeah, everybody has a different process. Mine is that I really think about my why and what success looks like from a customer perspective. So what do I want to help somebody to feel? And then do I feel like I can do that? And, for Julep, honestly, the first iteration of the business was a parlor business. It was about doing clean, green manicures, not having formaldehyde and nail polish, and then doing it in a way where women had access to healthcare, which is really unusual in the spa category. And that was something that Starbucks taught me, that when, Starbucks spends more for employee healthcare than they do on coffee beans. So is it a coffee company or is it a service company? I think you are able to delight people if you treat them well. And so all of these things were sort of what went into the first iteration of Julep. And then, and I thought I was God's gift to business. We were super booked at the beginning. I was like, starting a business is easy. I'm so smart. This is great. And then the Great Recession hit, and our revenue tanked to 30%. I couldn't pay rent. I couldn't pay my people. This whole idea in business around making payroll is just a concept until you know people's faces and they don't have money in the bank to pay their rent and they have kids. And so it's just like the incredible pressure of it. It was amazing. I mean, and I think that's what made me really realize, like, okay, this is for real. I have like nothing left at stake. Like, let's just go to, I went transparently to my landlords and I said, here's my revenue before, when I thought I was God's gift. Here's my revenue now. And I really can't pay. It's not like this concept isn't working, but I have nothing left to give here. And if you can, work with me, we'll build back. But I had to really be vulnerable and sort of say these things. And it's funny because I've said this to so many women running businesses now during coronavirus, like, go talk to your landlord, tell them you can't pay. And so many of them have been like, oh, I'm just like, I dipped into my savings to pay my rent. They didn't want to admit that something was wrong. And it's like, hey, this is not a secret. COVID is not a secret. If your business is struggling, it's really not your fault. It's like, this is an environment where it should feel totally safe to say, I can't afford to pay rent. My business is struggling. And still, people struggle with that or have a hard time with it. But anyway, I think the pivot sometimes happen because you have to. And we ended up starting a subscription service and then realizing that products sold, were what was filling the gap and helping us to stay afloat and to, pay people.
Yeah. Well, the struggles of running a business, the ups and downs are huge. So Vivian, also from our audience from our mentor program, was asking what was the biggest barrier to starting Julep? What kind of hurdles got you in that door before all the other hurdles came along?
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle for most people starting businesses is capital. And it's interesting because this sounds kind of cliche or whatever, very obvious, but the only thing that can kill a business is running out of money. So, until that moment happens, you can iterate, you can try new things, but the access to capital, especially for women of color, is super hard. When I raised money for Julep, it's so hard when people ask me for advice on that, because I feel like it's a lottery ticket, honestly. VC, I like to say it's like democracy. It's completely screwed up, but we're so lucky to have it. So where else could, somebody like me with my background have had access to millions of dollars to try to build the business that I felt like could contribute something positive to the world. But it's also crazy, like that only 2% of venture capital dollars go to women-run companies. So, I think how do you take that in, right? It was funny, I was saying that to a woman entrepreneur, and she said, I don't want to hear that, because are you telling me to stop? Are you telling me that it's hard? And I said, no. But when you get the no's, it's important to see it in context, that it's not about you. I had a VC one time who was going to sign a term sheet with me, and then he called me to say that his stepmother had died and he was going to Florida, so he couldn't do the deal. And this is like, a venture capital deal is something where it's sort of like a business marriage, right? You're in it together for a long time. To wait a week is not a big deal to me. But there are these like bizarre rules of venture capital where if your deal isn't going to kind of be signed so quickly, then it's not a hot deal and they don't want it anyway. So because this thing happened to him, we then were kind of like SOL, we couldn't have access to this deal that was almost done. He was on his way to Seattle to present the term sheet, and then he went to Florida and I never heard from him again. So it's not your fault, right? It's like, it's just, I think it's important to understand context and then just go out and still try. Don't stop.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask, actually, because Diva on our call also asked a similar question, but followed up with like, how do you keep going after that? You know, how do you keep ahead?
I think, sorry. Gosh, it's, I think one thing to do, an operational thing you can do is write down, like, I had a spreadsheet, and I think this was in that article that I shared with you. You know, it's partly just expecting rejections and understanding the context of them. So for me, when you meet with someone, you present your business idea, and it's like your entire life savings and your work and, you know, arguments with your spouse and all of those things, and then you, you know, you present your passion, and somebody says, like, I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, that's never going to work. Hey, it's hard, right? This isn't just even like a college, you know, sort of application or even a job application where they're like, sorry, we had so many other people, or an internal candidate got the job. It's not, it feels in a lot of ways much more personal than that. And there's a lot more rejection baked in it. So I think this is why it's like a muscle, like a thing that probably women need even more, is an ability to absorb rejection, like to assuming you might be rejected twice as much, but that you keep going and work, you know, and put it in the spreadsheet and have that be a part of what you expect. And support each other. I think that, you know, listening to these stories, I didn't know that. What's terrible, the reason I'm here, honestly, is that it's important to me to say these things so that people don't feel alone when you're rejected and you think, gosh, this is me and I'm a super terrible loser and I should just go hide. And no, it's not that. It's that we're all facing these rejections, and the more we can share that story to not be alone. I love the Brene Brown quote that, you know, shame can't survive the light of connection. And so when you're feeling embarrassed or ashamed or sort of feeling like you got some results that you don't know how to grok, it's important, I think, to pick up the phone and share it with someone, have a shame buddy.
I like it.
Somebody who's not going to put you further down, because we also know people like that. So it's important to pick that person wisely, but somebody who you can say all the things to and who will say to you, yeah, that happened to me too. This is, you know, we're all going through this. We're all in it together. And I think you just have to like keep going. You break it down to just today, not 10 years from now, and figure out what it is that you're doing today that is connected to that bigger purpose. It's like, that's the biggest thing for me in my second company. In the first company, I was so caught up in the idea of wanting to be a Silicon Valley CEO. There was this idea that I was going to be as good as the boys, do it better than them, and definitely work harder than them. And so even though it was a mom, like I would, you know, make lunches at 4 in the morning and get on that 6 a.m. flight to California and do my meetings all back to back and then fly home for the day. And like, I was just going to work harder and do it all. And I was really sacrificing today in order to reach this long-term goal. I think I got that backwards. I think the thing I believe now is that the long-term goal is what makes today fun and engaging. So because I have Tokki, I got to have an excuse to come hang out with you
happy about
that makes today fun. And when you turn it upside down like that, I've realized I don't do less. I'm not less successful. It just is the emphasis is on the right syllable.
Right. Well, let's talk about failure, because you love to talk about failure. You mentioned the article that we were talking about. We sent it out actually to our participants.
There's a quiz, you guys.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody should have read it. I don't know if everybody got to reading it when I sent it yesterday, but I did want to read my favorite quote from it. Whether it's appropriate or not, I don't know, but I'm going to read it. Rejections are evidence that you are alive and growing. If you can't think of the last time you were rejected, you have either stopped growing or you are a murderous authoritarian dictator. Either way, it's probably time to try something new. So you talk a lot about the importance of failure, and I think it's a really important thing for us to hear, especially in our mentor-mentee group. Tell me more about that.
Right. I mean, it makes me feel like that whole thing you read at the beginning, on the one hand, it was like, oh, I wonder who that person is. That sounds very accomplished. On the other hand, it was like, wow, how could we write that story sort of like equally as truthfully, with like, to achieve this, she was rejected in X things. Like, I mean, you could say, hey, I worked at BCG and I was actually pretty successful there. I was rejected from that firm maybe 4 or 5 times. I totally forgot this, by the way. My husband reminded me the other day, was saying it to our kids. But I was applying to these different offices, and I got rejected from the New York one, and rejected from the Toronto one, and the Boston one, and finally the DC one gave me an offer. And each time I got better at doing this case interview thing that was unfamiliar to me. But right, like you could write, that could be like, was rejected 4 times, right? So you can, so I think the thing we don't talk about enough is what that feels like, and realizing that you have to move through it in order to get to success. That it's not a magical thing. One of my least favorite things is when people say, oh, it's not a failure, it's just a lesson. So I really think that it doesn't become a lesson until you think about it and you absorb it. It is just a failure if you walk right by it and want to forget about it, which is such a human response. That's all we want to do, is like, oh, that sucked, I want to never think about it again. But actually, to make it a lesson, you kind of have to think about it. You have to hold it and be like, turn it around and upside down, examine it. And what are you going to do differently next time? So human interaction, I tell this story sometimes. I don't know why this is a beautiful office. And I know you're going to have this problem, or whoever deals with facilities is going to have this problem, where people care so much about where they sit. I mean,
I might never leave this seat.
That's like, oh my gosh, I have this VP level executive, and I liked moving us around because I liked people sitting in different places, so you get to see different people. I like personally sitting next to different people in my company, and so every 6 months we tried to do this office shift, and every time she would complain, and so I sat her down. I was trying to be fast about it. I was like, look, we're going to do this change, and I know you hate moving. You're going to say this. I'm going to tell you I thought about it. Like, here's why, and we're just going to do it, man. Like, can you just help me out here? And like, I have to go home. And so it's like 6:30 at the end of the day, last conversation, I rush it, I walk out. And it wasn't to minimize who she was. It was because I didn't respect her. It was just like, I know this way this conversation is going to go. And whenever you try to short circuit human interaction, it never works, right? Like it took me 2 days then to like kind of get her back. And get her energy back, and sort of, having to, I forget exactly why I started with this, but, honestly, but I did ask her for, but a helpful thing I can share out of that story is that I just asked her for a do-over. The next day, I said, I screwed this up. Let's just pretend that never happened and have like this conversation. And like, can you tell me, like, I just sat and listened to her and showed her, not just like told her, but actually showed her that I cared about the way she felt and what she thought. And both things were true. There wasn't really a surprise in there, but I could listen to it. Like, that's not the worst thing in the world, to sit and instead of just saying, oh, I respect you as a valuable team member. Well, what are the ways you show it? And so sometimes people do just need to be heard.
Yeah. You'd mentioned at one point the sort of the failure goal, and it sounds like you've mentored a lot of people, either formally or informally, like you're describing. But what is that all about? Giving somebody a failure goal.
Right. Oh, wait. You know what? A thread of that story. So just to, so one thing I failed at right here on this call is remembering the point of that complex story. But what I was saying on the story with the VP is that I did the do-over with her, but I think about that story maybe once a week, if not once a day. Sort of, is this a moment when whenever I am unkind, it is not because I am a mean person, it is because I am a rushed and busy person. And I have to remember that moment and say, am I going to belittle someone unintentionally because I can't just sit down and look at them in the eye instead of like being on my phone while half listening to them. And so the way you turn that failure into a lesson is actually to absorb it and do something differently the next time. So I think that's like the failure goal is like, go out there and do lots of things that you're uncomfortable with, right? Knowing that you're going to fail at most of it. I mean, when I was at a big company, I don't think at Starbucks, I don't know if I ever even made one real decision. Like, I think I carried around a glass, ball from meeting to meeting, trying to get people to sign off on it and talking about how pretty it was and polishing it and carrying it very carefully. And that was my job. And then when I was an entrepreneur, or in entrepreneurship, you're making 100 decisions a day. And some of them are little. It's like, remember the contractor when we were building out our first parlor called me and said, where does the electrical outlet go? And I'd never done a build out before, like at my house or at work. So I don't know where an electrical outlet goes. I don't even know who to call to ask where an electrical outlet should go. And so I was like, I don't know, it seems like maybe behind the desk, like over there. And it wasn't exactly perfect. I look at that, the next 10 years, I looked at it all the time thinking, that was not a great place for an electrical outlet. But hey, did we make the decision to move forward? Yes. Was the electrical outlet better in the other locations we built? Totally. Did I learn at some point, like, oh, you can call contractor friends or people who work with you who can kind of teach you how many feet there should be between outlets or whatever. And so there are people that you can gather who can help you, and there's ways to redo that decision later. But if you're not willing to fail, like if you're like, oh, I have to get every decision right, and if I don't get the electrical outlet question right, I suck as an entrepreneur and as a CEO, and I'm never going to be successful, then it's going to be hard because probably a lot of the balls that you have in your hand end up dropping when you're an entrepreneur. And the thing is, you learn most of them are made of rubber and they bounce and it's okay. And very few things are fatal. I think a big priority for all of us really is to figure out what are the things that really matter. Like, what are the things that if I don't get this right, something catastrophic will happen. And if you are really honest with yourself, there's very few of those decisions. Most things are fixable either with the person with an apology or just a request for a do-over. That's a really great actionable thing too. Like, I remember one time at Julep, my team worked really hard on a holiday collection, And so they did this big presentation. I walked in and they were like, ta-da. And my first thing was like, wait, where was like that thing? Which like, you know, why isn't this thing like in part of the collection? And I could see like their faces fall.
Oh.
And they were like, they worked so hard. There was like a creative theme. There were all these things. And I was like, I was an idiot. So I'm like, okay, look, can I just have a do-over? And I walked backwards out of the room. So I'm sure at this point they're like, we work for a crazy lady. But sometimes like that humor helps too.
Right.
And then I came in and I was like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. Like I can see how many hours of hard work went into this. Like it's creative, it's gorgeous, like it's whatever. You know, do you guys think it could be stronger with like just this one other thing, or was there a reason why we excluded that?
Mhm.
And then we could have a conversation.
Like
Everybody
open
was
it up.
happy, and there's like a million things you do wrong every day, and if you spend your time like I did when I was young, going like, tell me, like, why did you say that? I wish I'd done this the other way. You know, all of the things that you can do, because in any given day you're not perfect.
Yeah.
And if you spend all your time doing that, then you're not going to be open to continuing to do more of it, because as much as you're failing today, what I really want you guys to do is to fail more,
Right.
to go out and try more things.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it's related to your comments about rejection. So you talked about some obvious rejections, right? Like not getting a job at however, four different locations of BCG or whatever. But what about more intangible rejections? So we've got, you know, obviously a big audience on the phone. Somebody had asked, what do you do about just sort of rejections that are more subtle? You know, like you maybe got looked over for a promotion, or you know, think you didn't get a certain opportunity that maybe, you know, you should have. How do you handle those kind of, you know, softer, intangible rejections?
I think a great way to help protect you from the harm, the poison of wondering if that was, you know, how to process that, is actually to figure out a way to process it. You know, to sort of to ask the question in a like open-ended, curious way. So the path through almost everything to me is curiosity. If you come at something attacking, it's hard. But if you can give it a few days, not when passions are high, if you can find a way to be genuinely curious, like, why did this happen? What things can I do to be better situated next time? Find allies. I think it's really important to find an important thing for everybody to have is to have someone a level, or ideally 2 levels above you in a company, who will tell you the honest truth about the way things happen. So, you know, hey, this is when we get together and make promotions, like we only have 5. This is, you know, like how it looks like it's going to go down. Mm-hmm. Like it should, if it's a surprise to you, then you haven't done enough homework in figuring out what the true, you know, people say like politics, and I don't know if I like that word or not. Every group of people, whether it's a family or house of roommates or a company, it's a group of people, and there are rules and there are ways that, you know, decisions get made. And of course, because we live in the society we do, there is going to be conscious and unconscious bias. None of us are perfect, and it's going to be a long time before we root all of that out. All of that said, you know, hopefully if you're working at a company, whether here or elsewhere, you stay because you believe they're good people. And for the most part, while nothing is perfect, but there is more good than not. And so finding a way to ask the question to understand it. So don't run away from the rejection. Don't say, oh, I feel sad about that. I never want to think about it again. I'm never going to put up my hand again. It's really important to put up your hand and understand as much as you can. You're the most important audience. How do you take the decision, and what can you do to influence it? I think I was saying to you, that reminds me of that story of like, it is so important to put up your hand, because my best example of that is when I went to law school, our class was 50-50 men and
I
women.
was gonna ask you about that. I love that. So
I mean,
we're talking
squeeze
about
it in, we have
real
like
life.
2 minutes.
I know, we can't talk about it. No.
So the thing is, we're 50-50, and then the Supreme Court clerkship is one of the most prestigious things you can get right after law school. And so we went from 50-50 to 90% of the clerkships that came from Yale law students were male, 10% women. And so this wasn't a thing where we were always told, like, women aren't law firm partners because they drop out to have babies or they drop out to do other things. Nobody was dropping out. This was like 1 year, and we go from 50-50 to 90-10. Why? And it turned out that because this was the most prestigious job you could get, a lot of women who were really well qualified would not apply. Like even professors who were like, we're telling these people to apply. They were like, no, who am I to apply for this job? And a lot of guys who basically had the equivalent of straight Bs were like, I'm God's gift to law. I'm going to apply. And, it's so interesting because I have as you do, a son and a daughter. And I would say, like, have at it. Everybody who thinks they have something to offer, like, go apply. I don't begrudge the 90% of guys who did apply, go for it. Explain yourself and put in the application. And so I think women have to step up more, not wait until you're tapped on the shoulder to be like, hey, do you want a promotion? It's like, go chart a path, like think about who you want to be in 5 years, make the friends who are, a little bit ahead, and put up your hand, because if you don't put up your hand, then the systems at work, like what the Supreme Court maybe should have done, in my view, is they should have taken 100% of the women who applied, because they were all crazy qualified, and maybe 10% of the men, but that wasn't the way that they were going to work. It was like, we're looking at it from our end, and we're balanced. We're taking the same percentage of people, men and women, but the people applying are different. So, that's the way a systemic, like, bias that is trying to aim at equality is going to not get that result if we're not all working on every angle. So, so put up your hand.
Good advice. Well, I have a question that came in that I want to address from one of our special guests, actually, that's joining us from outside of PKJ. She wants to know how do you make a decision when there's just not enough information and not enough time?
It's so interesting. There's like a lot of it depends on who you are. For me, when I'm the entrepreneur and I'm the CEO, and actually my friend Daryl Cavens, who ran Zulily, also gave this advice to me. It's like, if it is between 2 equal things, you can sometimes say, like, hear the advice of team, but if it's like, pretend that the worst case scenario for me is 2 equal things, I really don't have a point of view. I can see they can both work, and there have been good arguments made between each. He said it is death to just kind of say, oh, they're the same. It's like, if they're both equal and you think one can work, but like, you have to pick one and then be passionate about it. What you can't do is take your like both ways thing. When you pick a path, you can be thoughtful, but then when you pick a path, you're all in and you go for the path. And so, I think we all do the best we can. The threshold for whether it has to be a perfect answer, I think that's the main thing I argue for lowering the threshold. And then what happens afterwards, right? Like, so it's not about how do you make that decision in the most perfect way. You make the decision, just say to yourself, what's the best I can do right now? And then watch it. And if you were wrong, admit it to yourself and figure out what the plan will be the next time. And make lots of room in your notebook for all the wrong decisions you're going to make.
Nice. Okay, I got so many more questions. Like, we need another hour. I wanted to ask you, so at PK, we're in the business of digital customer experience, and that's been such a huge part of your story. What were some of your lessons learned in creating the experiences you've created?
I think it's really important to every once in a while break through the wall and talk to your customers so that you're not just assuming what they're, what you think they want. But because the thing about digital experiences is that you can iterate on them much more quickly. Like when we built stores at Starbucks, it takes 18 months to build a store. If you put something in the wrong place, it's going to take a lot of money and time to move it. Versus in the digital world, you can say like, hey, we want the funnel to look like this. What if they knew this before that? Or if they saw this video that helped them make a decision? And you can A/B test a ton of things. It's really hard to A/B test as many things in the physical world. So I think what is exciting about the digital space is the capacity to learn quickly if you are open to sort of stumbling in public a little bit sometimes. It's funny, when we at Julep did a lot of customer collaboration and got input. A very basic one is like, hey, should we make A or B? And we're literally going to because we were asking ourselves, and whenever we ask ourselves something, I always say, is there a way to ask the customer this? Like literally in Facebook stories, it doesn't have to be huge, right? Or you could do a big survey, or you could do lots of different things today. But if you're asking yourself, should I do A or B? Then it's really great to be able to just throw that out there to real people. And executive at a big cosmetics company said, how can you do that? Because all the people who picked B, if you don't do B, they're going to be mad at you. And I think like, so iterating quickly and then, picking delight, right? Like don't be afraid to have people be mad at you. If that's the price you pay to further delight the people who are your core customers. So asking who that person is and then iterating quickly to delight them, I think is one of the most fun things about a digital business.
That's cool. You have obviously delighted a lot of people through your QVC stuff as well. I have to ask you, like QVC, you have presented and done these quick commercials for QVC well across the country. You've done a bunch of, what is that like? Tell some stories. You must have some.
It's insane. QVC is such a fun and crazy environment. I like to say that it was the first Amazon before Amazon existed because it's so data driven. And the fun thing is like who you might see there. Like I've seen Catherine Zeta-Jones, and who's as beautiful in real life as she is on screen. Lisa. Oh gosh. Can't remember her last name. The woman who's right there, Carrie.
Lisa Reddick.
You just like these people. It's so funny because sometimes I see them, and when it's somebody familiar, you forget that they're not people you know. You just know them from TV. So I'm like, hi. And I'm like, wait, I don't actually know you. But what's interesting, Cindy Crawford was there, is that we're all on the same page when it comes to sort of the dollars per minute. So the goal is sort of to, back when I did it a couple of years ago, was like up to $100,000 every 10 minutes or so. So $10,000 a minute. That's a lot of phone calls to make that happen. A lot of lipsticks or whatever. And so to inspire that, there's this whole thing of how you make it casual and and a fun conversation, but also it's like every second is precious. It's only 10 minutes to move a ton of inventory.
Yeah.
And then when you get out, it's interesting because I think celebrities often have a whole team of people who massage the answers for them, so they don't have to know that they're, or they can be gently told that their movie didn't go that well, that the critics are panning it. But at QVC, you don't have that. Like there's one screen, we're not allowed to take pictures of it, and it just gives you all the dollars per minute as it's happening. You can see the calls coming in and what you're saying, and whether that spikes or not. So that was interesting too for me, using that back and forth with digital, because I would test phrases sometimes to see if they cause spikes in calls, and then we could use that more in our marketing materials.
Yeah.
So everything is an opportunity to learn something that can inform how to better communicate with your customer. But yeah, it was, there's no massaging. That screen does not,
Does not lie.
Yeah, it does not
That's
tell
how
any
you did.
nicer to Cindy Crawford. But my only other funny thing is like, I feel like the more, the bigger the celebrity is, like the smaller their briefcases. Like they wear, like this dress, if you put it in a bag, has half. I feel like, like Cindy Crawford came in with like her dress fit in, like, it was like so thin and so like it looked amazing on her. But it was like, oh, your celebrities must have lighter and smaller suitcases because like their dresses are really teeny.
It's different material. Well, we are like totally running short on time, which makes me sad because we could talk forever, but I wanted to wrap up by thanking you, gosh, for joining us. What a treat. I want to thank everybody who joined us as well on Zoom. I wanted to encourage all of you, especially those special guests that joined us from outside of PK, to really engage with us. We're learning about mentorship. We're learning and pivoting our program. And we'd love for you guys to be involved going forward. So if you have ideas about insights and things about mentorship, please share them with us, similar to what Jane's been doing today. You can email us at dei@pkglobal.com and we'll send you information after this as well. We also didn't get to some of our questions, and so we'll do our best to get some of those questions out and answered as well. I did want to thank you so much for coming. We actually have a PK gift
Oh, yay!
for you,
Oh my
but
goodness.
that's not the exciting part. The exciting part is you mentioned the Tokki gift that you
Yes.
gave me a while back. And I figured out how to re-gift, which I know is part of your strategy. So I wanted to personally thank you. You will find my video message.
Oh, I'm so excited for this.
And I have to
Thank
say,
you.
men can do it too, because
Yes.
Chris actually wrapped that.
Oh, this is actually beautiful. I've never seen a wine bottle wrapped quite like this. It's very elegant. I love it.
Well, I just want to thank you for joining us. For everybody who's joined us, please look for our next event. We're planning another event for May, and so we'll get you the details on that. But thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it, and thank you, Jane.
This is fun.
It was really fun. Bye.